Welcome back to this special I-24 News Evening Edition. I'm Lucy Aharish. Joining me tonight is very special guest, Moshe Feiglin, Mr. Moshe Feiglin, member of the Israeli Knesset in the Likud party and the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset. Thank you very much for coming to our studio.
You're welcome.
So let's start. We just heard Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Your first reaction for his speech in the General Assembly?
Well, it was a beautiful speech. Very touching. He touched also his personal family experience and so on. Definitely a speech that gives the right and true message. But I think it's time to stop with those speeches. It's time to actions. I think the Prime Minister understands that as well. For about a decade, Israel is going on the path of a strategy which means let's spread the problem to the entire world. It's not only our problem, it's everybody's problem. It's the Americans' problem, the British problem, and so on. And I think that was a mistake. I think that was a mistake.
Putting Iran as the whole world's problem and not specifically Israel's problem?
I'm not saying that nuclear Iran is not the free world's problem. It is definitely a problem of everybody. But no one will solve it for us. If we will not solve it, no one will do the job for us. And giving the feeling that we're willing to put our defense at the hands of others is very wrong, definitely with the history of the Jewish people.
We heard Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that if Israel will have to act, it will act by itself. We will act and we will do everything in our power to defend ourselves. Do you think that Israel is capable to face the Iran nuclear program and to face Iran by itself?
Well, I believe my Prime Minister. If he said that, he knows that we can do it. That is first of all. But I'm saying more than that. I think we all understand that the Americans are not going to attack, definitely with the spirit that we see now.
Especially after the Syrian conflict and what happened in Syria.
Exactly. This is A. B, we all know for sure that the Iranians are not going to stop developing and reaching fast their capability to have their own nuclear capability, nuclear bomb. And so the conclusion is very simple. The time is now. As they say, if you want to shoot, shoot and don't talk. The time of talking is finished.
Do you really think that Israel should put itself into a war with Iran?
Look, I don't want to leave my children and my grandchildren, and no Israeli wants to leave his next generation a state of Israel, the state of the Jews, when the fanatic regime of the Ayatollahs from Iran behind the border are holding a nuclear bombs. Menachem Begin, the leader of the Likud during the 80s, understood that, and against all the pressure in the world, and also pressure from inside Israel, our president, Shimon Peres, was against the attack on Saddam Hussein at the time. Order the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, to attack and destroy it. He did that, and I have no doubt that today the whole free world, even if they're not saying it in public, outside, they agree that Israel did not only defend itself, but defend the free world. Just imagine that when Saddam Hussein marched into Kuwait at the time, at the first Gulf War, if he would had
In
then
1991.
in 91, if he would had then a nuclear capability, how would the world will look now? Okay, so it is not a question: do you want war? No one wants war. No one wants into a war. But when the logic, when the clear evidence that the Prime Minister put on the table very, very well tonight are so clear, and when we know that no one else is going to do the job for us, this is what needs to be done.
We heard and we got a message from officials in the parliament and in the government that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered his Knesset members and the Likud members not to say anything until tomorrow, until he's done with the speech, and you decided to react. You decided to come and give an interview and talk about it. Why?
No, he did not order the Knesset members. He ordered his ministers. I'm not a minister in the government. That is, first of all.
But you are part of his party, man.
Yes, definitely. I think that what I'm doing now is helping Netanyahu. Not everything that I feel free to say he can say, and I think we have exactly the same goal. And I think the people of Israel and people around the world should know the truth, should know the facts, and should hear that voice from Israel that's saying that the people of Israel will stand behind its leadership when the leadership will decide to defend Israel and to defend the next generations to come. We did not rise up from the ashes of the Holocaust to put our life at the hands of Rouhani or any other fanatic regime in Iran. And talk excuse me 1 second. And mentioning that historical fact, we should also remember that the Air Force of the United States and the warplanes of Great Britain flew above Auschwitz, knew exactly what's going on there, and did not bomb the trains, and did not bomb the facilities that the Germans built in order to kill all the Jews in the world. We should remember that and know that at the true time, when time comes, no one will defend the Jews but themselves.
But you don't think that Israel needs the American? Because we heard last year from Shimon Peres, Israel's president, that Israel doesn't have the capability to destroy the nuclear, only to delay it.
As I mentioned before, I didn't know that you're going to ask me about Shimon Peres, but as I mentioned before, Shimon Peres, our president, was against the attack on the Nusirak nuclear reactor in Iraq as well. I'm not coming from his party. I'm coming from Likud. Our great leader, Menachem Begin at the time, did not listen to Shimon Peres and did attack in Iraq. And there is no nuclear capability today in that country. I think our current leadership should go in the footsteps of Menachem Begin and not according to Shimon Peres' logic.
Benjamin Netanyahu talked a lot in the speech about Iran. Maybe even something about around 95% from his speech was about Iran. But he did talk about the peace process between Israelis and the Palestinians. And he said that Israel is willing to do some, like he said, painful, giving up some painful principles that Israel has for peace. Let's hear what he had to say, and then I want your reaction on that.
We hope that our common interests and common challenges will help us forge a more peaceful future. And Israel continues to seek an historic compromise with our Palestinian neighbors, one that ends our conflict once and for all.
So
I'm happy that he spoke only 5%.
Only 5% about the Palestinians,
that, and I think that was too much as
why
as
do
well.
you think that? Isn't it very, very important for the region to end this conflict? Isn't it in the
Right
benefit
now,
of Israel?
Look, behind the line, Prime Minister Netanyahu did not mention that, and that's good. But behind the line, there's a pressure to make a linkage between solving the Iranian threat and a withdrawal, or Israeli withdrawal from the heart of the Jewish homeland in Judea and Samaria, the biblical land of the Jews. That linkage is very, very dangerous, and I would say more than that. It is a pure anti-Semitism, because telling the Israelis that we don't have the right to exist in the world, to defend ourselves as any other human being in the world, unless we pay for it. And it doesn't matter how, with land or with concessions from any other kind. It's pure anti-Semitism. We have the right to defend ourselves. We have the right to live, and this is the question that is on the table right now. It is not about territories. It's not about Palestinians that never exist 100 years ago or even 50 years ago. Okay? It is not about that. It is about the right of the Jewish people to survive, to live peacefully like anybody else. So putting both issues on the table at the same time is a mistake. I'm very happy that Prime Minister Netanyahu, to my understanding, gave some lip service of 5% of his speech to that subject. And if I would have done that, I would not give these 5% as well.
You wouldn't give this 5% as well because you don't see a solution between the Israelis and the Palestinians?
No, because I don't see the problem.
You don't see the problem?
I don't see the problem.
So
you see, the only army in the Middle East that don't kill its own citizens today is the Israeli army. The only place in the Middle East where Arab people don't need to be afraid of the army of its own of the state where they live at the existing time is in the land of Israel, the army of the state of Israel. When you're talking in the name of a Palestinian people, you're lying. There is no Palestinian people.
They are living right next to Israel.
They're Arabs. They're Arabs. A lot of Arabs here. Nowhere in the Middle East, nowhere in their own countries.
Do they know that they don't exist?
They have. Let me tell you. Yes, they know. The answer is they know, and they're saying it. They're saying, we're not really Palestinians. We are part of the big Arab nation. You know, I invite all the British people, the American people, all the free world to come to Israel. Walk around in the biblical sites, in the archaeological sites, dig a little bit. Every stone you pick in Israel, you find archaeological site and evidence of a history of 1,000 years, 2,000 years, even 3,000 years of the Jewish people. You'll never find a coin from the 19th century of a Palestinian state. There isn't such a thing. The bottom line is this idea of so-called Palestinian nation is actually an idea of how to destroy Israel. We should give the Arabs in Israel all the human rights, and they know that they will only get it here. But political rights, national rights, they can get in any Arab land, not in a Jewish land.
So you're saying basically that human rights, yes, no political rights, no nation, although they have a flag, although they have army, although they have a support and a coordination between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. So
where was the Palestinian flag before 1967? They killed each other when somebody mentioned the word Palestinian state. They did not want it. It was not about that. I can give you more and more historical facts.
Yeah, but unfortunately, we have only 20
this whole
seconds
idea
more.
of Palestinian state is a fault. They themselves don't really want it because no one ever in history, no group ever in history, got so much help and so much money to create its own country, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen because it's false.
I'm sorry, but I wish I had 5 more minutes with you to continue this conversation. Mr. Moshe Feiglin, thank you very much for this conversation with us, and thank you, our viewers, for being with us tonight. Tomorrow, we will be here at the same time, same place from the Jaffa Port. Have a great night.